Good view 1 and phrase 2. Give it a round of applause to Okay, sorry. Yeah, that's communication. That we support the narrative. That sounds right. That we celebrate differences with other people rather than find a commonality, but the actions. Everyone, please. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the third speaker of the academic thing.
Saying that black people love their children too, or that gay people also experience love, has never changed the mind of any racist or bigot in the world. Differences will always exist, and pretending that they do not makes progressive arguments less believable, it makes them less effective, and it is offensive to people who experience disprivilege, who feel their experiences are different and that ought to be valued. 3 arguments in this speech, but firstly, some setup. We support a narrative of celebrating differences as compared to commonalities or similarities. That is, that we would prefer that this was the main or most broadly held narrative. This isn't an active debate from any particular perspective. And we think that the kinds of differences that we would prefer to be celebrated are those that are valued by those particular individuals and those communities. So we will not be celebrating conditions that are externally imposed, so for example, higher crime rates, but we'll be celebrating internal differences such as religious practices, and we would be willing to say that we support black gospel churches as a different approach to Christianity. The first argument I'm going to bring you is that differences between individuals are more socially beneficial than their similarities, and therefore in principle we ought to celebrate them instead. We think that particularly in relation to cultural or social differences, this value is immense. Firstly, because it provides meaning to individuals' lives who are able to construct their own identities in a way that is different from those around them, and that is particularly important to them and their culture. But secondly, because these often provide new and valuable perspectives that challenge ingrained ideologies and viewpoints. And the value of that diversity is not just its inherent value, but also its value in helping us come to a better understanding of ourselves and our society and knowledge by having more knowledge to pick from. So for example, particular Asian philosophies, which take very different approaches to Western perspectives on those things. But thirdly, these differences provide valuable knowledge as part of those cultural and linguistic traditions. So for example, indigenous languages and practices, which tell us a lot about the environment and nature in a way that you would not get otherwise. That means that they are worth celebrating principally because they are valuable. But secondly, celebrating similarity explicitly disregards and belies the value of those differences in a way that is immoral and offensive, and therefore we ought not do it. Firstly, because this often includes using offensive analogies which describe the actual content of that culture. It is things like saying that we ought to see that Ramadan is basically just the same as Lent, and therefore it's not that weird, which ignores the fact that they are factually incredibly different and different in the religious meaning that they provide. But secondly, it often implies that the less privileged viewpoint derives its legitimacy or its normality or its value from the majority or Western side of that analogy. So saying, for example, that Ramadan is acceptable because it is similar to Lent, to saying that the love that is experienced by gay people is okay because it is similar to straight love, necessarily sets up a hierarchy by which you normalize those things, which is offensive to the value in those differences. And that is why we would principally prefer to celebrate difference as opposed to commonality. But second argument is why a celebration of difference is a more effective way to combat bias and discrimination. That improves individuals' lives and improves our society, because we are less likely to pursue oppressive structures and more likely to treat each other with respect. Because I think the core question in the practical clash of this debate is how you get people to empathise with each other in the face of socialised biases and cultural expectations. And let's note firstly that every successful multicultural society or city in the world celebrates the differences and says that that makes their society stronger, as opposed to saying that they ought all assimilate and pretend to be exactly the same. 5 reasons in this argument. Firstly, similarity is necessarily an ineffective strategy. Firstly, because it is less believable to the vast majority of people you are trying to persuade, because that is not those people's immediate intuition. Firstly, because on a shallow and initial level, people do look different, and it is quite illogical to say that they're necessarily all the same, particularly in the kinds of differences we're often talking about, like racial difference, where that is an obvious and shallow difference of skin colour. But secondly, in terms of the way that people are socialised to necessarily view other groups as different, you are running against the grain of everything they've ever been told their entire life in trying to get them to believe that individuals are similar, and therefore it is likely they will dismiss this argument, as that is much easier than having to challenge all of those biases on top of an additional claim that people are all the same. But secondly, it's an ineffective strategy, because the claim that individuals are all the same or that there are lots of commonalities is much more fallible, because differences will always exist, and people will latch onto those counter-examples as a way of believing that the narrative of commonality is incorrect, because difference as a narrative to celebrate is unfalsifiable, because it does not claim that everything is different. It just claims that there are some differences and some similarities, whereas a claim of commonality is saying that in most important ways, those people are the same, and that is something that absolutely begs for counterexamples, and those counterexamples are what people will find and what they will believe, because as I set up, this is a context where you're trying to change people's minds, where those views are quite powerfully socially entrenched, and the path of least resistance is to dismiss the narrative on both sides of the debate, as opposed to the much more believable narrative that those people are different, but those differences are good. Secondly, even where similarity is a narrative is believed, it emphasizes the experiences and features of privileged members of oppressed groups in a way that means that we misdirect and mistarget our responses to that oppression. So, for example, we focus on gay marriage or the love is love slogan because that is easy to catch onto. But the core differences of the experiences of LGBT people who are most vulnerable, so for example, the extreme violence that trans people face, is not something that could ever be included in a narrative of similarity, and it means that we disregard those struggles and do not target them. Thirdly, it minimizes the extent of the problem because it undervalues the lived experiences of disprivileged people by saying that you are the same but for your skin color, rather than probably the more factual claim that almost every aspect of your life is fundamentally affected by white privilege and your race, and those claims therefore mean that we think it is less of a problem than it is, and we target more solutions in response to that. Fourthly, the sameness that is celebrated is necessarily exclusionary, and therefore that celebration does not alleviate disadvantage, and in fact, it compounds it. Because the common ground that is found between the majority and the minority sits on a particular side of the fence. It sits on the side of the fence of majority people in that evaluation, because the structures and normative values that dominate our society mean that we will not ever choose to celebrate a similarity that we see as worse, but because of structures of privilege, the things that are worse are the things that are more likely, perceived as worse, are more likely to be experienced by minority groups. So if you look, for example, at neurodivergent people, we celebrate the similarity of people with autism as being incredibly intelligent, and therefore that is something that is similar to us just to a greater extent. But that is not something experienced by all autistic people, and rather we ought to celebrate the actual difference that is experienced in their lives. Fifthly, minority individuals are also likely to put forward conflicting narratives that their experiences are different for the reasons I'll get to in my last point. But also, that means that this appears like infighting and it appears like inconsistency in the narratives put forward, which makes it less believable. At the end of this point, discrimination is not founded on a belief that any differences exist. It is founded on a belief that the important things are different. We think that difference in and of itself should be celebrated. We should not turn a blind eye to it and ignore it, and instead fight the actual biases that exist. Lastly, why is this incredibly harmful to oppressed people? Firstly, they perceive differences in their experiences in themselves because they see that they are living a life of oppression, and this then says that that is not truth. It says that they are the same, and that is likely to make them feel incredibly re-traumatized by that oppression by devaluing it. But secondly, often the claims that are made are just so obvious that it's kind of offensive to just say them. Saying things like gay love is valid, when you say that to a gay person who says, of course it fucking is, why did you even have to say it? I think that questions and devalues those experiences in and of themselves. A narrative of sameness is not believed, it is offensive, and is morally what we ought not be perpetuating.
Cool. Now for the first meeting.
That speech didn't give us a mechanism as to why you will be more empathetic to a person who you saw as radically different and alien to you. Why you would accept their religious traditions when you couldn't relate to your own. Why you would accept these people in society when they had nothing in common with you. Firstly, what we support in this debate. Secondly, how this increases